Hey, welcome to the Pitch Book Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Matt, and we got Zach with us. Zach, how are you doing, buddy?
Good. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you.
You celebrate Halloween in your home?
Of course. I have the past couple of years decided, and maybe it's because of Costco, that we are the full-size candy bar house. At least until we run out.
Wow.
I buy like four boxes at Costco. So that's like what, 120 bars, costs about $80. And as soon as we run out, then we have some backup candy, for the the plebes. But
I thought you were going to say you bought 4 candy bars.
No.
That's more my speed. Like, hey, you get after it early, you get the big candy bar. But when we're done, we're done.
And I feel bad for the little girl that's is like 2 years old, dressed as a fairy, and she gets the Hershey's with almonds. She's not going to eat that. That's going straight to the parents' house, or the parents.
True.
There's no way. There's no way she's eating that one. So
it is a weird idea. I mean, I feel like we buy all this candy. My kids go out. It's like I give it all out, and then they come home with the same candy bars that we all bought. It's like it's weird. It's like a net zero thing, and everyone just runs around for the night, and it's fun.
Exactly. But yeah, so, what do you do on Halloween, or what are some of your memories of Halloween?
Okay, so when I lived in England for a little bit, for a couple of years, this was weird because you go to England, you're expecting the language to be a little bit different, the words to be a little bit different. What they do, what's customary, they call it it's like All Saints Eve or something like that. They don't call it Halloween. And the kids go door to door like in the US, but the families give out change. They give out money. So, you're kind of expecting to give out candy bars and things, but they just give out like 20 pence, 50 pence, or the nice neighborhoods, they give out a pound coin, which England has every kind of coin. They've got 1 pence, 2 pence, 10 pence, 5 pence, 20 pence, 25 pence, 50 pence. They've got change for everything. And so the kids are walking around and they're like, jingle, jangle. And I just thought, you know what? That's perfect. That's what it should be. You just forget the candy. Let's just get down to brass tacks.
Yeah. Well,
I'm here for money.
Yeah. And honestly, the British are known for their excellent teeth and dental care. So it makes sense that they don't pass out candy, right? I mean, that just makes sense.
I wasn't going to say anything, but
hey,
maybe it's better. Maybe we should do that in the US. Like, just take my money.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to make sure that Costco gets their share from me, right? Like I got to make sure that I go buy some stuff from Costco so that I can pass out that candy.
I might do that this year.
My goal is basically to personally ensure that Costco is surviving. So it feels like it every time I go in there, actually.
Okay, let's do this. You text me how much you spend at Costco. I'm going to go to an ATM. I'm going to get the same amount in dollar bills.
Yeah. And we'll hand them out.
Go to the bank, and I'm just going to hand out dollar bills this year.
That's funny. Okay, that would be, the kids would love that.
Maybe.
I would think so.
At that age, kids don't even really know what money is.
They probably pull their phones and say, seriously, you don't even have Venmo, Zach? Come on. That's probably what they do.
I'm just going to do a QR code on my kids, trick or treat thing. Like just Venmo straight up. Just Venmo me.
Just send me a request, a 25-cent request on Venmo. Okay. Anyway. Halloween. Yeah, well, I'll just say one last thing about Halloween. As a teenager, I would pay money to go to a haunted house to be scared. What was I thinking? I hate being scared. I couldn't even play like Silent Hill as a kid. I don't like to watch horror movies. Why am I paying somebody $20-$30 to go get scared? I don't like that. This is not a smart idea.
I think you get after like the mileage of storytelling. Like, do you with your friends? It's I don't like. I've been to maybe 2 or 3 haunted houses in my life, and I hate them.
I think the mileage comes from the stories about how scared Matt was at the haunted houses.
Right.
So
exactly.
Basically, yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Your friends got mileage.
Exactly. And I paid for that, so that was good. All right, let's hit our first book. I am first today, and I'm going to try to be short. I say it every week, but this one I'm going to try to be short because the book is so insanely long. I can't even come close to doing it. And what it is, oh, there we go. It's Led Zeppelin by Bob Spitz. It is, I don't know,
Dude, I cannot wait for
700, 700 some odd pages.
this. Is it really?
Yeah, it's you see how thick that thing is. I don't know if that.
Okay, how much of that is pictures though?
Not much. I mean, there are some pictures. I actually, to be fair, listened to this book, so there's not a ton of pictures, but maybe you can see a few here. Anyway,
yeah. Okay.
No, this is very intense biography. This is the gentleman that did the biography for the Beatles, which I haven't read. He did a couple other biographies. I think Julia Child, which is weird. I almost want to read that just because it's such a weird subject. Julia Child, for anyone that doesn't know, is probably the first woman ever to have a baking show, I guess, on the TV. So anyway, but he's known as this biographer. This story is insanely in depth. I'm going to hit a few highlights. Let me just tell you really quick about Led Zeppelin, and it's funny because I think Chuck Klosterman has a quote, and I can't exactly remember right, but it's something effective like, at some point in every young adolescent's life, Led Zeppelin is their favorite band. And then at some point they kind of outgrow it, and then they come back and like them again. So Led Zeppelin for me, it was kind of one of those bands. Obviously, I was born around the time that they were kind of wrapping things up. So I didn't discover them until like the early 90s. And, obviously I heard Stairway to Heaven and things like that. But I ultimately kind of grew up or at least listened to the kind of the greatest hits album, right? So that was my experience. Like, oh, here's some of the greatest hits. And I liked them. It was a 2-disc anthology that I had, like the remasters or something like that. The second disc was a little slower, not as rock and roll, a little more bluesy, slower. I didn't like it as much, but I did buy a few albums and kind of listen to them anyway. So I kind of liked them, but I definitely was not like super into them and knew a ton about them, other than they were just kind of this 70s rock band that were very much an inspiration for a lot of bands and heavy metal. So a couple of the interesting things to me were the fact that these young musicians in England loved the blues for some reason, like American blues. There was I think it was kind of like Mississippi Delta blues is what they called it. And they would just go to the record stores and try to look for these obscure American imports. And that's hilarious because when I was a kid, I used to go to the CD store to look for British imports. And anyway, so they loved these records. They would share them. And what was interesting is at one point, Jimmy Page, the guitarist, was in a band with Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck. And so it's kind of crazy, like just all these famous guitarists from that era knew each other, were in bands together. And a lot of them were actually, so Jimmy Page was initially like in a kind of a cover band. They would just go play these dance halls in England, and they would just play covers. But he just fell in love with the guitar, learned how to play, just became a master at it. Ultimately becomes a session musician. So he basically is just paid to go in and play music, and then somebody else sings or whatever. They just hand him the music. And at first he didn't even know how to read music, because he just learned on his own, and then he taught himself how to read. So he just became a very professional musician. And then started the Yardbirds, and they were kind of like this 50s sounding, but there's that little seed of that rock and roll in the late 50s, early 60s. They had ties and stuff on, but they sounded a little psychedelic and a little bit more, less buttoned up, I should say, than other bands. Anyway, he ultimately kind of recruits a few people. I don't even want to get too into the details. It's just interesting how many famous people you would recognize from the early stages. Ultimately, they just again, I don't want to. You could go read the Wikipedia page, watch a documentary, or read the book. What was crazy about it is some of the tours in the U.S. They toured the U.S. quite a bit. The way the book starts is it talks about a guy who hitchhikes his way to hear Led Zeppelin in Boston, and he's just blown away by them. Like, I think it was about their first album. And it turns out that was the lead singer of Aerosmith. And he was just like, oh man, I got to go back and talk to my guitarist about how amazing these guys are. So it's just that they're just very influential. But the tours in the US with all the groupies, there's a famous story that I'm not going to get into. about them fishing in Seattle from their hotel room. There's a hotel where you can fish from, and just some crazy stuff that happens with some of them and their opening the opening bandmates. Anyway, it's very very crazy. If you did not know the 70s, it will open your mind a little bit, and everything that you can imagine that a rock band in the 70s was doing on tour, they were doing it, and probably 10 times worse than you can imagine. Anyway, they but what was it was that was probably really interesting and cool, but I personally enjoyed him talking about how they recorded some of the tracks, how they recorded some of the albums. One of the interesting tracks is the drummer John Bonham was really frustrated recording this particular song, and they said, "Come on, we just want to try it one more time." And they play the whole song through, and he just kills it on the drums. And somebody at the very end coughs, and Robert Plant goes cough at the very end, just kind of because he's thinking this is just no take. And Bonham is just so frustrated. They're like, "That's it. We're just using this take." So if you actually listen to the song, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name of the song, but it's it's still sad. You hear the cough, and then you hear him yell or hear him sing cough at the end of the song because they're just tired of recording. So just kind of interesting little things like that. One of the things about these kind of books that I like/hate is they'll talk about some of the influences, and then I stop listening to the book and then go and listen to some of the songs that they're talking about. Or it'll be a Led Zeppelin song they're talking about, and I won't recognize it by the name, so I go and listen. So the problem with this is I'm sitting here reading/listening, and then I have to like stop what I'm doing and go listen to the song they're talking about. So it's kind of frustrating for me. And maybe you guys can read this and get over it, or maybe if you're actually reading it, you can listen to the song along. But since I'm too lazy to read, I just listen. So anyway, that's why I took. Not only is it a very long book, but it's. I personally had to stop and listen to a bunch of stuff like influences of them, random songs that they were talking about, and it just kind of ends up. It ends with John Bonham, the drummer, ends up dying. What a surprise with all the alcohol he was partaking in like 1980. So they quit touring. They end up talking about they do a one like kind of they get back together, and John Bonham's son actually plays the drums for one final show in London, and it's so which is pretty cool. But like the drummer's son, ends up playing with them years later, or at least for one show. So anyway, it was just a very interesting. There's tons of stuff in there. I like I said, I can't get into it all, and I honestly can't even remember it. It was so long and ridiculous. But if you like, I liked it. I'd probably give it a triple.
Okay.
If you don't like Led Zeppelin, you shouldn't read it, and no bother. It might be a single.
I don't know. I mean, a couple years ago, I heard this story. I think it was Van Halen. They used to have, maybe it was Led Zeppelin, or maybe it was Van Halen, but they would have request that there be a bowl of M&Ms, and that all of the brown M&Ms be taken out, like right. in their contract before they came. And that was their way to verify if the stage crew actually read the contract, or wherever the venue was being held.
Right.
And if there were any brown M&Ms, they're like, you didn't read the contract, which meant all of our lighting's not right, the mics aren't right. And so there's little things like that. You think that's pretty good management. They're throwing some things out there to have a better show. So kind of interesting how these guys are on so many drugs, drinking, and just crazy successful. Why?
Oh, go ahead.
Why do you think that's part of the creative process? Like just
probably
seems rife with more with rock bands, not that it doesn't exist in country and rap and other genres, but it seems like rock is just.
Yeah, it's very cliche, right? I don't know how they can play while high and drunk or whatever. Obviously, they must be just so talented they can. Although he does talk about, there are times when they're just performing so poorly, right? Like because somebody's drunk. Something. I think Bonzo, the drummer, actually passed out once on stage. I had to like pull him off the stage and had some roadie kind of come up and try to play the drums along with him. Anyway, so there are these random times where somebody walks off stage and Anyway, it's just crazy. I don't. Have you ever seen Spinal Tap?
No.
This is Spinal Tap. Okay, Spinal Tap is like a mockumentary of basically Led Zeppelin, and it's hilarious. Anyway, if you ever want to watch a show, it's called Spinal Tap, and it's basically just making fun of rock bands like this, and it's hilarious because they one of the big things in Spinal Tap is they want to have Stonehenge on stage, and this is a direct reference to Led Zeppelin because they did have something like that on stage. But they're like, yeah, we gotta have the Stonehenge. It's gonna look so amazing, so cool. And then when they get it, it's like tiny on the stage. It's like smaller than like the guy's knees or something.
Oh no.
Oh, it's just hilarious. So this is Spinal Tap is a hilarious show that is worth watching. And
Okay.
anyway, all right. So that was go ahead.
What's your favorite Stairway or
Song?
Freudian slip? Yeah. What's your favorite Led Zeppelin song?
Definitely not Stairway to Heaven. I don't know. I like Black Dog, Communication Breakdown. Um, I I was actually surprised at how many songs I knew kind of from the greatest hits. And then and as I was reading the book, they'd go through the making of each album, and I would go back and listen to the album, and was surprised to like know a few of the songs, right? Uh, sorry, like some of them were on the greatest hits, some of them I knew because I had a few of their albums, but I didn't have every single one. And I was pleasantly surprised at how much of their catalog that I knew pretty well for not being what I'd consider like a huge Led Zeppelin fan, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I definitely, you can tell a lot of I definitely love the blues lead guitar stuff. It's funny, some of the stuff they talk about in here is Jimmy Page doing like literally like a 20-minute solo on guitar, and John Bonham doing like a 25 to 30-minute drum solo. That's insane.
Yeah.
Like, and actually people are getting tired of it and bored, and they're like, oh, hey, Bonham's doing his doing the drum solo, it's time to go get a drink, time to go to the bathroom, because it's going to be 25 minutes of him banging on the drums.
It's so fun though. When I was in college, I'd have a 3-hour drive to home, back to school, and we would turn on Freebird. I mean, that's a 10-minute song.
Yeah.
Mountain Jam. I can't even remember who the band was, but I remember the song, and that was a 30-minute song of just solos. I loved it.
No, I agree. The Stone Roses, on their second album, John Squire, the guitarist, clearly is taking a page from Jimmy Page, no pun intended. Yeah. And he's just all over, like, with his blues guitar. And there's a live album that I have where each song is probably 8 or 9 minutes, and the guitar solo will actually like lead into the next song. It's unbelievable. So
that's
I agree with you. You gotta it takes a little bit of patience. This is not just radio stuff. Anyway, enough of that.
So you give it a triple?
I'll give it a triple. Again, if you don't, and I like them, honestly, it probably deserves a home run as far as how well researched it is and how good it is.
Who is the author again?
Bob Spitz.
Bob Spitz. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I've read any of his books. Pretty good biographer though. Does he specialize in bands, or?
He's done the Beatles. He's done Julia Child.
Okay.
I think he did Reagan, I think, as well, Ronald Reagan. So I think he does specialize in biographies.
Interesting.
Anyway, so it was
all right.
It was cool to me. It was very interesting just because I enjoy music, and especially it was interesting to hear about the live music and some of their songs that normally are 4-minute songs. They drag it out for 20 minutes. And what's kind of cool is there's a lot of bootlegs and a lot of live recordings of Led Zeppelin. So if you do like them, there's a lot you can find on Spotify and other places, Apple Music or whatever. So to me, that's kind of cool. I really enjoy live music because it's just a slightly different take on what you hear on the album. So anyway, that's it.
I know a couple of their songs, Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah, of course.
But I'll tell you this, I never felt comfortable wearing a Led Zeppelin shirt. It's like the kids that wear Nirvana shirts. You see them everywhere today.
Right.
The Homelanders or the whatever generation around, maybe millennials.
Yeah, and they've never listened to them. And
it's like, do you know who Nirvana is? No, not really.
What's funny is
that's how I feel about Led Zeppelin. It was just like one generation back.
But they'll also be, those are vintage t-shirts you see now too, is Led Zeppelin. You see little kids wearing Led Zeppelin shirts, True. So
and they don't know.
But you're right. It was definitely not quite our generation. But I still really enjoy him. So anyway,
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so the book that I'm going to cover today, I'm going to say a name. You tell me if you recognize this name. Okay.
okay,
Do you recognize the name Chris McCandless?
no, not at all.
No. Okay. All right. As I start telling this story, I'm willing to bet that a lot of people have actually read this book. I haven't read it. It's probably been 20 years. And I thought it would be kind of fun to review this story. It's really interesting. So it is a true story. It's about this young man named Chris McCandless. He goes to college. Dad was a NASA engineer, and there was a family friend that had kind of donated for his college education. He finishes his undergrad, writes home, tells his parents, "Hey, just finished, graduated with a 3.7. I feel pretty good about that. I'm going to go touring." It wasn't uncommon for him to just get in his car. I think he had a Datsun, and he would just drive all over the U.S. So this kid is very much like a free spirit, doesn't really care about material possessions. He had $24,000 to go on to do graduate work, and his parents were kind of expecting him maybe to go to law school. He secretly donates this $24,000 to a nonprofit fund that helps people that are hungry. I can't remember the name of the fund, but he just donates it and then he disappears. His parents don't know where he's at, and he just like goes to live off the land. So he ends up driving the story. So John Krakauer, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. The book is called Into the Wild. You ever read that? Does that sound familiar at
Sounds
all?
familiar, but
Okay.
it does sound familiar.
It's kind of a crazy story. So he travels all over the U.S. kind of like a vagabond. But he's a well educated
What
kid.
what year are we talking? Is this
This is
during
in
Led Zeppelin times?
like 1990 to
Oh,
1992.
90. Okay, so
Okay, so I was 12 years old when this story came out, and it did hit the news. So he's traveling for a couple years where he's just vagabonding. Like at one point, his car gets stuck. I think this is by Lake Mead. He can't get his car to start, so he just decides, I'm just going to abandon it. But he doesn't want his parents to really know where he is, so he takes the plates off. He takes all of his cash and he just burns it in a like a pile. He just burns his stuff, grabs his backpack, just takes off, and he does all kinds of odd jobs. He's working at McDonald's one day, another day he's working
did
for another
you
family.
let me ask
Yeah.
you a question? Did you almost pass out when he's burning cash? Did you almost like have a heart attack there?
Yeah, and I think it was like just his as you read the book, he's just not materialistic at all. Like the way that he thinks,
Yeah.
he just thinks that life is much better when you're just like a free spirit. Just go in
Okay.
nature, go live off the land. So he's kind of vagabonding around. He changes his name to Alex Supertramp is what he calls himself. So people just call him Alex. Really friendly kid. People, no one really knew who he was. He said he was from North Dakota because he worked there for a little bit, but he wasn't from North Dakota. He's from back east, like upper class, upper middle class family. So he's traveling around, just kind of living hand to mouth. And I just wanted to share a couple parts of this book. So here's an example. He says one morning, and he kept a pretty thorough journal. So that's what makes the book interesting. As John Krakauer is kind of telling the story, he is also John is sharing some of his own experiences and just how they have kind of a similar mindset. Uh, so Chris or Alex, he says, one morning I was shaving in a restroom when an old man came in and observing me asked me if I was, quote, sleeping out. I told him yes. And it turned out that he had this old trailer I could stay in for free. The only problem is that he doesn't really own it. Some absentee owners are merely letting him live on their land here in another little trailer he stays in. So I kind of have to keep things toned down and stay out of sight because he isn't supposed to have anybody over here. It's really quite a good deal though. For the inside of the trailer is nice. It's a house trailer furnished with some of the electric sockets working and a lot of living space. The only drawback is this old guy whose name is Charlie is something of a lunatic, and it's rather difficult to get along with him sometimes. So he's just kind of moving around. Like people are just helping him out, you know, working odd jobs. And he loved reading Jack London. So if you remember reading any
Yep.
Jack London when you're all about
Yep.
the wild.
Yep.
So
Call the Wild.
that's right. Yep. Call of the Wild. John Krakauer says McCandless had been infatuated with London since childhood. London's fervent condemnation of capitalist society, his glorification of the primordial world, his championing of the great unwashed, all of it mirrored McCandless's passions. McCandless conveniently overlooked the fact that London himself had spent just a single winter in the North and that he died by his own hand on his California estate at the age of 40, a fatuous drunk, obese, and pathetic, maintaining a sedentary existence that bore scant resemblance of the ideals espoused in print. So Chris like continues on. He at one point he buys a canoe and he drops it in the river. This is in Arizona, and he's like, I'm just gonna like canoe my way to Mexico. So he like goes as far south as he can until the canoe finally gets stuck. He can't move it, and so he just moves around. But his ideal, where he wants to get to, is to go live off the land in Alaska, which is like the harshest territory. You know, you've got bears, wolves, every wild animal you can think of. So
Not to mention it's bitter cold.
bitter cold. Well, this is in the summertime. So like
Okay.
sometime around May, he works his way up the coast through Oregon, through Washington, makes it to Alaska and hitches a ride. Okay. Um, into Denali National Park. So he's just vagabonding, hand to mouth, hitches a ride, and the guy's like, "Hey, do you need some money? Do you need some like real clothing?" He's like, "No, I'm fine." I believe he had a 22 rifle, and you can go look all of this up. There's pictures of him, and he, like I say, he kept a journal. So sometime in early May, he hitches this ride, goes on a hike to go live on the land, and he makes it to. So he crossed this river. I think it's called the Teklanika. I might be mispronouncing that river. So he's able to cross over, and he finds this old touring bus. It's like a bus number 142. You can go look up the picture. He's got a camera with him, so he's taking pictures of himself. So he lives in this bus, and he keeps a record of like little squirrels that he's eating and animals and seeds, and he's got some potato seeds that they speculate that he had kind of carried in with him. Sometime around July 5th, he's making his way back out. So he was about 25 miles in from the closest civilization. So he was like, a little short of a marathon run. He starts his way back, and on July 5th, he goes to cross the river, but it was too high. Like it was too high for him to cross. So he felt like, I'm stuck and I can't get out. So he went back to the bus, and there he made it to, I'm just going to share a part of his journal. Such a fascinating read. He says, day 100, made it. He noted jubilantly on August 5th, proud of achieving such a significant milestone. So he's 100 days living in Alaska with like nothing. He says, but in weakest condition of life, death looms as serious threat, too weak to walk out, have literally become trapped in the wild, no game. So he's starting to run out of food, becomes emaciated. He left this note. I'm just going to share a last couple things here. The note said, SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out of here. I'm all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I'm collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you. So when he would leave the bus, he had his note there, hoping that somebody would find him.
Yeah.
In his final journal entry, this is on August 12th. So he came in May, tried to cross back over in July. This is a month later, August 12th. He records this. This is from a book from Louis L'Amour, Robinson Jeffers' poem, Wise Men in Their Bad Hours. He wrote this down. He said, "Death's a fierce meadowlark, but to die having made something more equal to the centuries than muscle and bone is mostly shed weakness. The mountains are dead stone, the people admire or hate their stature, their insolent quietness. The mountains are not softened or troubled, and a few dead men thoughts have the same temper." And then he closes his journal with this. He said, "I have had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye, and may God bless all." So he passes away. The hikers that found him, it was about they're guessing it was about 19 days after they just found this terrible stench coming out of this bus. Mm-hmm. And they go to inquire and find him in his sleeping bag. They find his camera. The pictures were developed. So when you go on to, if you look up Chris McCandless, you can find pictures of him outside of the school bus, big smile on his face, super happy. Yeah, just like living on the land. And people for a while after this came out have hiked to that spot, taken pictures in that same pose with their legs crossed, smiling, and all the while his family doesn't know where he's at or what's going on. Like, he hasn't really informed them of anything. At one point he gets a ticket and or excuse me, when they found the Datsun, that's what it was. They researched, who owned this. They found Hertz Corporation, and Hertz said, well, we sold the car to this family like 15 years ago. It had 125,000 miles on it. And he actually loved the car and he refused. His parents wanted to buy him a nicer car. He said, "This car works fine. Are you kidding me?" Anyway, so they don't know where he's at. They find his body. They think he might be from North Dakota. And so this search kind of begins, like, who is this person that's taking these pictures, has a rifle, and just starves to death. It is a really crazy story, but that was just his ethos, was to kind of get out, get out of the system, go live your life, enjoy nature, and just live on the land and just have authentic relationships with people. But I thought, wow, what an interesting story. So
Zach, this is maybe the weirdest book that I wouldn't. Why did you read this? What? Okay, this does not sound like a Zach book at all.
So no, yeah. This is, well, it's interesting because he kind of breaks away from this expected life. He's expected to go to law school, very intelligent, got good grades, but he just followed his passion. And John Krakauer, he wrote another book called Into Thin Air. I don't know if I think he wrote Into Thin Air, I'm pretty sure, where they hike Mount Everest. And that's where I got kind of into like John's books. And that is another book maybe I'll cover another day. But this was just like a really interesting story. And it's kind of sad. Like, you feel proud for this kid that he followed his passions, but you're also kind of sad that he just, like, that's where his life ended. And he didn't want it to end there. He tried to cross back over, couldn't cross the river, and just became trapped in the interior of Alaska. And Denali National Park is just a beautiful park, but it's kind of in the center.
Oh yeah, it's in the middle of nowhere.
It's in the middle of nowhere. They did a study. So their science teams kind of went back and they looked, science teams, that's a really official term, but they went back and tried to recreate what was going on with the river that day. Was there more like ice melt and water was flowing? And they surmised that for that 2 or 3 day period when he tried to cross, the water levels had risen. If he had tried to cross a couple days before, he probably would have made it back over. But just the day that he made the attempt, and I'm not sure how far the bus where he was camped was to the river, but I'm imagining that he was just exhausted. It's like, I don't think I can hike 25 miles back out. They also speculate that maybe some of the potato seeds that he was eating had become kind of moldy, and he accidentally poison himself, because he's a really bright guy. I mean, he had taken care of himself up to that point. So yeah, it is an interesting book, and some good ethos in the book from his journal. Some really interesting ideas.
Okay, so
You don't even know what to ask.
no, I'm going to ask you, what are you going to apply from your life? Because we always try to do this, right? Batting practice. What are we going to take from this and practice or utilize? So, in a weird way, we both read books about somebody, people following their passions, right? Especially Jimmy Page. I mean, he basically built Led Zeppelin. This guy, his passion was very strange to me. Not what I would want to do, but interesting, I guess. What do we take from that? Just to follow your passions within reason? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I mean, this is an extreme story, and maybe
Sure.
that's why I felt drawn to share it. That it is easy to follow the path that's laid out for you, the path of least resistance.
Sure.
But sometimes that's not the path that you need to be on. I think there are people really that are born with talents, dreams, but maybe are just too afraid to like make the jump. And so there are things that you just need to try out. If you're passionate about something, maybe get it started, day one or one day, right? And for him, it was pretty clear. I think as a parent, keeping those relationships open with my kids. I'm not saying that his parents weren't involved in his life, but it seems like there was some tension.
Sure.
To where he was very independent, and your dad's a NASA engineer. There's probably some expectations that you live this certain way. And he just said no, and just kind of ended that relationship and went down, full throttle down the path. So I think as a parent, like, keep those relationships with your children pristine. Keep those lines of communication open. Don't push your kids too far down one path that maybe they're not desiring that path at all. So, and I've got a quote to share from the book.
Is this from the book? Okay, yeah, because that's some feedback we've gotten. From some feedback we've gotten is that the quotes should come from the books that we read. So
okay.
Anyway, yeah, I'm glad you have something. Let's hear it.
All right. So here's the quote from the book today, from this book. And this is from Chris's journal, Alex Supertramp. He says, so many people live within unhappy circumstances, and yet will not take the initiative to change their situation because they are conditioned to a life of security, conformity, and conservatism. All of that which may appear to give one peace of mind, but in reality, nothing is more damaging to the adventurous spirit within a man than a secure future.
Okay. to each their own, I guess. I don't even know what to tell you.
Okay. Sprinkle in some passion, just a little.
Hey, you know what? I'll tell you that. So let's do the walk up music or walk out music section.
All right, let's do it.
Just because when you guys listen to this, I will be in the UK at a couple different concerts, and there just real quick, just go see some live music. That's my suggestion is go see a band that you like. Go travel to see them if you can afford to, right? That's what we like to do, and for us, it's a fun way to kind of mix in a little bit of culture. Go to different cities within the U.S. or outside the U.S. See a band you like, or go to a baseball game. Whatever you want to do, go out and do it. I'm all for that, but just make sure you have enough berries to survive, and that you're not stuck on a bus that's going nowhere.
And don't cross rivers. Advice. Yeah, don't cross rivers that you can't get back over. Maybe that's a lesson. Don't take the passion too far. Like, can I get back over this thing? Don't burn the boat. You might need that later.
There you go. All right, a lot of good learning stuff. All right, hey, appreciate it, Zach. We'll catch you next time.
Okay,
thanks everybody. Bye.